everybody, how's it going? Welcome to mindful message number 2. A little cold and wet today for August. It feels like fall. That's weird. But today's, or the second one for today, is the pros and cons to city and country life. We all talk about it. We all compare. I've had the pleasure of living in both city and very far out in the country. I had a mixed childhood. Started in the hood, grew up mostly in my teen years in a safer area, which is probably why I didn't end up worse. But thank God for it. So I broke it down, the pros and cons to it. Let's talk about country life living first. Let's talk about the pros. I like to focus on the good stuff. First of all, you get more bang for your buck when you buy a house in the country. Not all the time though. It really depends on the acreage. If you get a lot of acreage, then your price goes up. But you usually can get bigger houses outside of a city for something that you would pay for like a condo or an apartment. And just wide open space in general. You aren't on top of your neighbors. You usually have a lot of privacy. There's usually distance between you and your neighbor, but not all the time. Small towns are still considered country. It's just enough crowded sometimes where you feel like you're a part of a community and you're not lost in the middle of nowhere, or you can literally be lost in the middle of nowhere. That's the great thing about the country. Suburbia is kind of considered country living to people who live in the city. So I'm more focusing on the deep country. Less tax money for land and housing. Again, that really depends on acreage, but for the most part, you usually are paying more for square footage in a city than you are in the country. It's just better for your wallet. More of an investment because you're investing in land and you never know what areas are going to pop up. I just think that you get more land than you could ever get in a city, more yard space. It's very rarely in the country do you get a house with a small land plot. Usually land comes with the house. There's usually, not always, less crime in the country, more safer neighborhoods. I don't think there really is a safe neighborhood anymore where you can just leave your doors and cars unlocked. That world doesn't exist anymore, but there is a place where you don't have to worry about it so much. Your kids can walk in a group of friends together and you're not going to have to worry about shootings all the time, and that's definitely more comfortable to raise your children in. Did I already say less tax? Yeah, I did. Nicer people. It's more family oriented and community oriented. Everybody usually knows everybody. When something bad happens to you, people rally together and help out. If you're going through something, if you need rides, if you need somebody to look after your pet while you're away, you're more likely to find trusting people in the country. But, you know, the one downside of that is the gossip. It's far worse in the country than the city, believe it or not. But like I said, if you're more religious or spiritually based, you can usually find a community in the country that is based around your religion or your belief system. They usually like to stick to certain areas, not all the time. And there's cute little, quaint little towns that have multiple religions in them. It's not like I'm saying they're specifically religious, they're just community based. They have like YMCAs and, you know, a clubhouse where everybody goes on Friday nights and hangs out at the end of the week. They have local spots. Smaller school districts, so your children have more of an opportunity to get one-on-one teaching, but that can go either way. Sometimes in the country, they kind of shove large areas together because there isn't enough kids, and they don't always get the best money. So although they get more time and attention from teachers, they don't always have the best resources. Let's talk about the cons. There's less work for people to get to. You usually have to drive a distance to your job. There usually isn't public transportation out that far. Long commutes when you do find a job. You're looking at least 20 to 30 minutes just to get to a place when you're really out in the sticks somewhere. That includes grocery stores. The town where my dad lives, there is like one road and it has a gas station and it closes at 9 p.m. So if you are, hungry after 9 p.m., you got to drive at least 30 minutes to find something to eat. There's less nightlife. Usually people are quiet and antisocial after a certain time during the weekdays. Usually everybody has the common thing of, when it's the weekend, everybody gets loud and rowdy. And, the teens in the country are far more rowdy than the city kids, but for the most part, it's quieter. But like I said, nosy people, usually in the countryside, it's a higher drug count, surprisingly. This is usually where people, make drugs or grow it, or there really isn't much to do, so they get into bad things. It could be judgy and isolating if you aren't usually normally from the country. Moving to it, it's hard to adapt to. Far from people or neighbors if you do need help. Sometimes you have really shitty phone service, or if your power goes out, it's going to be really bad. Maybe there's only one pole for the whole town. And if you have kids, there's not much for them to do to keep them busy. Those are the cons of living in the country. Let's talk about the city. The pros, obviously the nightlife, always stuff to do, especially if you're in a place like New York City that never sleeps, but not all cities are like that. There's just an array of art, music, culture, people. There's always something going on, a festival, a concert, a comedy show, a movie, premiere, whatever. Usually you have more access to that in the city. More job opportunities. You usually make more money in the city, more hourly wages. Again, with the more job opportunities, there's usually more professional jobs, high-paying jobs in the city. Big business opportunities, like I said, diverse people, good schools offered. Like, you can literally send your kid anywhere because they have charter schools, they have private schools, they have public schools, far more advanced, and usually have the best access, usually, to the learning supplies. Shows, museums. Like I said, you can take your kids anywhere, and adults when they're visiting. There's always something to do. You have access to public transportation, usually. Better aid pay if you are on a government system. They give more money to cities, so you usually get better aid packages when you do live in the city. That's why a lot of homeless people kind of stick around the city. There's also shelters and food kitchens and stuff like that that isn't in the country all the time. Let's see, the cons of city life. More money, everything costs more. Even though you make more, everything does cost more. It's jacked up for the tourists, and also the people that live there have to deal with a lot of tourism. You have to live on top of each other usually, don't have much personal space. You don't always have the best view, loud, noisy, polluted. High pay for tuitions for your kids' schools, or for like daycare, or to take your freaking dog to the salon. Everything has a tuition or a club fee, usually. Lack of housing. It's hard to find space, and that way you get into wars when you're trying to rent someplace or buy something. Traffic jams, heavy, long commutes just due to traffic. High crime, usually dangerous. Like, it's far safer for you to walk in the country at night than it is in the city, but only because there's more criminals in the city. That's all I got. Hopefully that was helpful to you deciding on where you want to live. Overall, if you can't adjust to quiet, if you aren't good at entertaining yourself, if you don't want a close-knit family, I would, as in on top of each other, hanging out with each other, watching movies, because there isn't much to do, especially in the cold, I would avoid country living. It's more for people who can entertain themselves, bit of a loner, don't need the social life, don't need the thrills. If you do need the thrills, you need the nightlife, you need the eccentricness, there's nothing wrong with that. City life is for you. The country could be too quiet and it might eat you alive. It really just depends on the person.